Stories, Philippines podcast.
Have you ever lost yourself in a moment so completely that the world outside simply ceased to exist? The low hum of the fluorescent light above, the click-clack rhythm of 10,000 plastic keys, the faint, sweet smell of instant noodles and stale energy drinks. Maybe you're chasing a high score. Maybe you're just trying to escape the noise of real life. But what happens when that escape becomes a prison? When the shadows you're running from finally find you in the flickering glow of a computer screen? What happens when the game starts playing you? I am Paul, and you are listening to Stories Philippines podcast. The year is 2005. Manila is a city built on the promise of speed. Speed in the jeepneys that choke the avenues, speed in the cell phones that connect the masses, and now, speed in the growing networks of glass and steel boxes called internet cafes. These weren't just places to check email or print a school report. They were cathedrals of youth, darkened sanctuaries where the real world was muted by the roar of cooling fans and the relentless, driving bass of 1,000 digital battles. In this year, two games reigned supreme, gods in the newly built digital pantheon. One was Ragnarok Online, a sprawling world of cute adventurers, endless grinding, and the promise of a digital fortune. The other, the true titan, was Defense of the Ancients, or Dota. It was a game of strategy, a complex, high-stakes digital chess match played by teams of 5, demanding intense focus and hours of commitment. For many young Filipinos, the iCafe was their second home, a place where school uniforms were traded for worn t-shirts and where the pressure of family expectations was replaced by the intense, immediate pressure of a team waiting on your next move. They would play for hours, 6, 8, 12, sometimes 24 hours straight, fueled by cheap coffee and the pure adrenaline of competition. This commitment was not seen as a simple hobby. It was a pilgrimage. It was a test of willpower. But like any pilgrimage, it had its darkness. Our story begins in Malate, Manila, an area known for its busy streets and a curious mix of old, faded elegance and new flashing neon. Tucked away on a side street next to a perpetually closed laundromat and a sari-sari store stocked with questionable snacks was a nondescript iCafe simply called The Grind. The name was appropriate. It was a place where people went to work in a way, mining digital gold and experience points until their eyes burned. One regular at The Grind was a 19-year-old student named Benino Benny Lacson Dizon. Benny was not a standout in his college classes, but in the virtual fields of Dota, he was a legend. He was the anchor of his team, known for his ability to play the powerful, slow-moving heroes who required incredible patience and a steady hand. He had the kind of calm focus that could scare a nervous opponent. Benny had been at his station number 7, a lucky number he always claimed, since 7 o'clock the previous morning. He was deep into a marathon session, a 40-hour challenge he'd set for himself to rank up before a regional tournament. It was just past dawn. The light outside was a sickly yellow-gray, but inside, the monitors cast a cool, unchanging blue glow on the faces of the dozen or so players still hunched over their keyboards. Benny was in the final push of a critical match. He hadn't stood up in hours. He hadn't really thought about standing up. His world was a 30-inch monitor, a flickering health bar, and the urgent voices of his teammates buzzing through his worn headset. His stomach ached, a dull, constant reminder of the instant noodles he'd scarfed down 6 hours earlier. His eyes were dry, stinging. Benny, man, you gotta push. Don't fall asleep. I see the fog. They're coming. Hissed a voice in his ear, belonging to his teammate, Armand Raimundo Cortez, who was sitting 2 stations over. Benny didn't reply. His fingers moved with an almost robotic precision, executing a complex series of moves. He felt heavy, weighted down by a fatigue that seemed to press not just on his body, but on his very spirit. He blinked, and for a split second, the screen went black, then flashed back. In that moment of darkness, he saw not the game, but a figure standing right behind his chair. A tall, gaunt man dressed in what looked like a faded white shirt, a man whose face was completely obscured by shadow, even though the monitor light should have illuminated it. Benny shook his head, instantly clearing the image. Sleep deprivation, he told himself. It's just my mind playing tricks. He felt a sudden, ice-cold breath on the back of his neck. Not a draft from the ancient air conditioning unit. This was a specific, single point of cold. And then, he felt a weight settle onto the back of his chair, as if someone had just leaned over his shoulder to watch the game. Whoa, haha, Benya, you just saved my life! Nice move! What was that? You never used that combo? Arman's excited voice broke through the headset. Benny looked at the screen. He saw his hero had executed a perfect, complex defensive maneuver. One he knew intellectually, but one that was too risky for a fatigued player to attempt. He hadn't consciously ordered it. His hands were still on the keys. He felt a weird, disconnected pride, like he was watching someone else play using his own hands. To practice, man, Benny mumbled, his voice hoarse. He felt the presence behind him shift. A strange, silent relief. The weight on the chair lifted. Benny didn't dare turn around. He focused on the screen, but his heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He felt like he had just been given a terrible, wonderful gift. He played better now, faster, with a clarity that cut through his exhaustion. When he finished the match, they won. A massive wave of relief washed over the grind. As Benny logged out, finally ready to leave, his eyes caught the reflection in the dark, empty screen. Station number 7. He saw the empty chair, but for a fleeting moment, he saw the blurry, pale reflection of a face that was not his own, leaning in close, a shadowy, triumphant smile fixed on the glass. The story of Benny Dizon and the mysterious helping hand is not an isolated one. Across the Philippines, as the iCafe trend exploded in the early 2000s, so too did a new kind of haunting. People called them the digital dwellers or the proxy players. It was a chilling evolution of the traditional Filipino concept of the duende, or the unseen spirits that attach themselves to a specific place or person. Filipino folk belief holds that places of intense human activity, markets, ancient trees, abandoned houses become energy sinks, attracting spirits. The iCafes, with their constant stream of human emotion, the incredible stress of competition, and the intense focus of players spending days without sleep, were like powerful magnetic beacons for the supernatural. The common folklore elements started to fit a new digital narrative. 1. The Kape and the smoke. The Kape, the gigantic tree-dwelling entity who smokes a massive cigar, traditionally lures travelers to their doom by making them lose their way. In the modern context, the smoky haze of the packed, unventilated iCafe and the way time seemed to melt away inside became a new trap. The spirits weren't taking travelers into the forest, they were luring them into a digital maze. 2. The Manananggal's hunger, the split-bodied vampire of folklore traditionally preys on sleeping pregnant women, stealing life. The players in the iCafes were not sleeping, they were running on fumes, their life force, their breath, expended in a blinding rush of digital activity. The spirits here were not after blood, they were after the turn, the ultimate high-speed, all-consuming experience of being alive and playing a complex game. They had died perhaps before they finished their own game. The specific dark history we see weaving into this phenomenon is the concept of the stolen turn. It's a sad, small side story that circulated in hushed tones among the iCafe owners and their regulars. There were several documented cases in the late 90s and early 2000s of young men who died while playing, victims of sudden cardiac arrest, stroke, or sheer unimaginable exhaustion after multiple day sessions. They died with their hands still on the keyboard. What if the spirits Benny encountered were these young men, students who died before they could log out? And what if, in their digital restlessness, they found a way to piggyback on the living, to possess a healthy body for just a few minutes, to finish the game they never could? This is an ancient belief, the dead demanding a right to the life they lost, but played out on a high-resolution cathode ray tube monitor. Scientifically and psychologically, the experiences like Benny's fall into a recognizable pattern. The intense, long hours of gaming often induce a dissociative trance state. This isn't a mystical term, it's a psychological one. When a person is highly focused on a repetitive, engaging task, be it meditation, running, or a high-level Dota match, the brain enters an altered state. The frontal lobe, responsible for rational thought and self-awareness, slows down. The brain's reward centers, however, are constantly firing. The player becomes completely absorbed. The line between the digital world and the physical one blurs. Sleep deprivation amplifies this. It causes micro-sleeps, moments where the brain momentarily shuts down, leading to visual and auditory hallucinations. Benny's shadowy figure behind him, the sudden, inexplicable feeling of cold air, the sensation of his own hands moving without his conscious command, these can be explained as hypnagogic hallucinations and extreme dissociation caused by a cocktail of exhaustion and a hyperstimulated mind. The fact that Benny played better after the possession is also telling. It might have been a simple adrenaline surge, the body's ultimate survival mechanism kicking in, or it might have been an echo of an international parallel to this phenomenon. The stories of the gamer's curse in South Korea, where similar deaths in PC bangs, the Korean equivalent of iCafes, led to whispers of digital ghosts, spirits so obsessed with the game they refuse to cross over. The human mind, when pushed to its limits, will find ways to explain the unexplainable. It will externalize the strange, involuntary movements of a body on the brink of collapse and attribute them to a helping or malevolent force. Access exclusive content on Patreon, where we dissect the 5 most common psychological conditions that mimic paranormal possession. Find show notes and support options in the description to learn more about the scientific studies of gaming addiction and trance states. From a theological perspective, both Catholic and Protestant faiths, the dominant religions in the Philippines, view this phenomenon through the lens of idolatry and the demon's temptation. The core sin here is one of attachment, the prioritizing of a temporary digital world over the eternal real one. The extreme commitment, the refusal to rest, the neglecting of one's body, family, and studies is seen as a modern form of worship that invites a dark influence. The idea that the spirit takes a turn at the keyboard is a chilling reflection of the theological concept of a spiritual debt. If Benny was playing better, it meant he was getting an edge, an unfair advantage. And in the spiritual economy, every advantage must be paid for. The price is not gold or money, the price is a small piece of his soul's agency. The spirit is not a friend. It's a loan shark who takes an interest payment in the form of control. This theological insight is an ancient warning. When you dedicate your entire self to a narrow pursuit, especially one that requires the sacrifice of your physical and moral well-being, you leave the doors of your spirit wide open. The darkness doesn't have to knock. It just walks in and sits down at the empty station. Benny Dizon eventually stopped playing at the grind. He sold his gaming account and focused on his studies. He said he couldn't stand the smell of instant noodles anymore, or the sound of the clicking keys. He said he always felt the cold breath on the back of his neck, even when he was alone in his room. He never knew for sure if it was a hallucination caused by 40 hours of no sleep or a lonely, dead student trying to steal a few more minutes of a game he loved. But here is the thought that keeps me up at night. We have always told stories about the land, the trees, the rivers. We have worried about the spirits who live in the dark corners of the forest. Now, in the 2000s, we have created new landscapes, digital realms of immense complexity with their own rules, their own dangers, and their own deep wells of human suffering and obsession. If a place of intense emotion can attract a ghost, then what kind of spirit must be drawn to the relentless, eternal game playing out on the internet's battlegrounds? Are we simply creating new homes for the old gods and monsters? Or have we created something new entirely? A ghost unique to the high-speed century? A restless soul who doesn't want peace, only a high-speed, high-score finish? You can decide for yourself. Submit your stories at storiesphilippines.com and tell us if you or someone you know had a strange encounter in the darkened halls of an internet cafe back in the day. We want to hear your local tales of the digital dwellers. This has been Stories Philippines Podcast. What is the true cost of an unfinished game? The game is never over. It just moves to a different board. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and share this podcast with someone who could use a good story or a warning about the things that lurk in the shadows of the screen. Support the podcast financially in ways you can find in the show notes. Join us next time for another story from the heart of the Philippines.